about that.
Heather, you're on mute right now.
Hi, Dr. Erickson. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. I'm the owner here at Dyer Appliance Academy, and I have some of my colleagues here that they own a lot of appliance repair businesses throughout the U.S. And also on our online. And if you could kind of just talk about your thoughts on opening up in America. What worked for Sweden? Why do you think what's going to work for the U.S.? Kind of some of the background on your story there. I guess we could start there. That might be good.
Yeah, the conversation, I mean, just to cut to the brief, is that herd immunity is really the big thing people have to understand. Herd immunity happens every year. It's called the flu season. It lasts for 3 to 4 months. People get infected. Some people have the vaccine. A vaccine's only function is to make herd immunity happen faster. So that's what when you get a flu shot, it helps us get to herd immunity quicker. Herd immunity means if there's 10 people in a room and the virus is spreading, as soon as 7 or 8 people get it, the virus doesn't have anywhere else to go, and it destroys itself. It dies. So in the community, every year the flu starts. It moves through community. Some people are vaccinated, and it helps us get there faster. Well, with coronavirus, this was a new type of flu. They called it novel. Just means new. And we saw what happened in China, and everybody got a little nervous about that and said, whoa, let's lock us down. So they saw it was moving fast. They saw the deaths happening. So they isolated us. The problem with that is that flattens the curve. You guys have all heard the term flatten the curve. When you flatten the curve of disease, you drag out the flu season, and then you put people in their homes where they're sanitizing counters, their immune system is dropping, you bring them back together, you're likely gonna have a secondary spike, and your death is gonna come later. Every year people die from the flu. And I don't wanna minimize the death of coronavirus, but at this point we've had 62,299 to date. A typical flu season will have 60-some thousand deaths in 2017, 2018 per CDC numbers. So what I did was I studied Sweden. Dr. Giseki's a state epidemiologist and infectious disease doctor. They didn't lock down. Their kids are in school. Their businesses are open like yours. And we say, did it make sense? After 2 months, what happened? Well, their death rate as of today, let me pull it up here, is about 220. Sweden is actually 256. UK, that is on extreme martial law lockdown, is at 350. I mean, that's what they said online today. They're on strict lockdown. So we're saying that locking people at home, shutting down businesses, when you look at Sweden versus the UK versus the US, hasn't made a significant difference in death rate or prevalence per the epidemiologist. So this is my opinion. I'm reading from the epidemiologist and learning what they know. And then I interviewed Dr. Witowski, he's a biostatistician, absolutely brilliant, been watching flu cycles for 20 years. They say there's no data to back up sheltering in place. There's no data to back up social isolation. All it does is prolong the flu process, prolong herd immunity, and the secondary, I'm calling it collateral damage, is colossal. Businesses closing, hospital institutions furloughing doctors, furloughing nurses. I have a friend with 2 coffee shops. She's getting ready to go under. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the state doesn't seem to care about your business. So that's why I'm doing this. I'm on this platform to say, I am tired of watching anxiety, watching depression, watching my fellow small businesses go under for no good reason. We don't need to be sheltering in place. Hand washing is helpful. Sheltering in place and social isolation has not helped. And Sweden has some social isolation. They limit groups less than 50, but their kids are in school. Businesses are going. Restaurants are spread out a little bit. It's a rational approach. They close down stadium events. That makes sense to me. And I'm saying, as Americans, can we look at Sweden? I know there are 10 million people. I realize they're smaller, but I think they've had good results. And I think we can take a lesson from them and take a stepwise approach and get our economy going again. What would I do? I would come down this ladder one step at a time. How would I do that? I would open up schools immediately. All kids, I would follow the Swedish model. All kids 16 and under, back to school immediately. In mass, open it up, let it run. Kids do very well with this disease. Then if we watched our disease cycle for a few weeks, we'd say, okay, now let's open up businesses and take a stepwise approach. Churches, and the stadium events, the rock concerts, those can wait. But people like you who are trying to run your business and feed your families need to get back to work. I live in Kern County, and I called all the CEOs of the hospitals, and I looked at the data online, and we had 14 patients in the hospitals out of 1 million people. Should everybody shut down their business over 14 hospitalized patients? I don't know if you guys agree
that's
with
a really good point, Doctor. I tried to get some information today because I know Sacramento, where I am, they turned the old basketball stadium into a field hospital, 250 beds. And so I was calling the governor's office trying to get an answer with whether any of those beds have been filled. Are there patients because of this? Are there less? Are there more? I couldn't get any answers, unfortunately. But I'm definitely going to keep trying on that.
We prepared for, like in New York, they're having a problem there. But even some of the ER doctors in New York who are on the front lines are saying, folks, our ERs are slowing down. It's time to open up. The curve is flattened, and now we need to get us back to work in a stepwise fashion. I don't think continuing collateral damage and damaging families and small businesses beyond repair is a good strategy. And I just don't think we should stand for it.
No, a lot of us here agree with you, and a lot of our businesses, we were considered essential, so we did keep working, but we had, there's just a lot of questions on, how we operate now. And, in the beginning, things weren't going so great. We've got one of our panelists here, Debbie, came up with a couple of good questions that she wanted to kind of just get some sort of an idea from you about what your opinion is on these. Debbie, you want to unmute?
Sure. Hi there.
Hi, Debbie.
Well, some of us do 200 jobs a day, and we do that 5 days a week. And in each house we go, they have at least 4 people. So we're exposing 1,000 people, thousands a month of people. And none of my technicians have gotten sick. I've had one had a cold. We have no idea what it was because we were not testing at that time. But he's back to work now. Everything's fine. Made it through no problem. So I think the main thing is fear, and I really do appreciate you bringing this to the line because the media is a fear factor. I mean, they're just showing fear to everyone, and they're not seeing us on the front line. They're seeing the hospital, and I realize that they're getting worn out. And they show that a lot. But we are going into homes every day, seeing people every single day, and we're staying healthy. And we're not trained. We're not educated in any kind of microbiology, or most of us aren't. And so we're successful. We're staying healthy, and I don't think a lot of people understand that, and the fear is driving everyone. So my question is, how do we turn that around? How do we make everyone feel a little bit more comfortable? There's not a single customer that I have that's fearful of me coming into their home because they want something.
Let me tell you this. Today I can go out to Costco. There's 300 people in Costco, and we can all stand in an aisle and talk to each other. And then I can go to Home Depot and stand in the rake aisle and talk to 100 people. But they tell me if I go to church, that's dangerous.
That's right.
Does that make sense to anybody here?
No.
I can go to Del Taco and buy a burrito to 2 people that aren't wearing face masks. But if I try to go to the taco place next door and sit at a table, that's dangerous. You see what I'm saying? Very inconsistent messaging. You guys are smart. You don't have to have MD PhDs to have basic common sense and say something doesn't smell right here. And the not smell right is the fear. They made a decision, our administration, which I support. I support President Trump. I support Pence. I'm not some rogue person here. I support them. I towed the line for 2 months. And then I said, folks, I've studied night and day. Oftentimes I read all night. I've just been on this quest because I feel the pain of the average American business, and I've had enough, and I don't see enough data in my state to keep the collateral damage moving. So how do we get back to this? I'm going to say we need to start voting for different people, because if your representatives are keeping you down, if they are keeping you at home, you need to vote differently. I'm in the state of California. If we don't like what's happening, we need to think about what we're doing with our elected officials, because I don't think there's any reason to shelter in place at this point. And I don't know where everybody's from, but in our state, I don't think the disease process necessitates shutting down the businesses anymore.
Yeah, that's a real good point, Doctor. I personally have had a handful of customers needing service and calling and just pleading with me about the fact that I'm going to hand them an invoice at the end of it, and they just didn't have any money because they were either restaurant workers, servers, or the places that got shut down immediately with zero income until the government could really start putting money in people's hands, which, thankfully it sounds like money is getting into people's hands now. But we did have James over in Chicago had a couple of points he wanted to make. So James, I'll throw it over to you to ask the doctor what you want.
Thanks, Doctor. Thank you for being so brave to stand up against the undoubted media onslaught you're getting hit with, because it's an unpopular discussion. I've always found the idea of the public policy and medicine being completely separate, and we're seeing some evidence of bad public policy as a result. I always thought it kind of childlike to think that, well, we're going to shelter in place to save lives, as if you were trading lives for lives, because we are trading lives for lives. And the collateral damage, as you so well put it, is going to cost all kinds of lives. And I think ultimately it may lead to a higher death count because of the collateral damage than the COVID ever would. Possibly. I don't know. I mean, just judging on the stats from 2008, 2009, and that disaster that happened economically, and the human toll that was taken there. So, but getting off the political side of it, though, is just on a practical level. As Debbie mentioned before, we're going in and out of homes. We want to protect our technicians. We want to do like real practical things. I don't want to be taking medical advice from a politician who doesn't even follow their own rules. I mean, just here in Chicago, we had our own mayor getting their hair cut. We had our governor flying his family with the security detail to a place in Florida. They don't follow the rules, so people are starting to bridle. And I agree. I toed the line for a couple months here, trying to hang in there. But now we're seeing sort of draconian measures that don't even make sense anymore. You can't buy seeds and plant tomatoes, but you can go to Home Depot. You can't go to church, but you can go to a dispensary. So there's crazy things going on. But again, I'm going to get back to the medical side of it. What do we do for our technicians in equipping them properly with PPE so that we don't transfer this to themselves, to their coworkers, and to other customers?
The vast majority of people who get COVID-19 have little to no illness. You know the term asymptomatic carrier? You know what an asymptomatic carrier is? It's a healthy person. They put these labels on them. Asymptomatic carrier. I'm going, you mean a healthy person? So most of us get COVID. You may have all had COVID by now. If I did serology, IgG, immunology, which is a blood test, I'll bet you 2 or 3 out of you already have had it. And you're like, well, I didn't even feel it. Exactly. And so much of the time, 95% of people get through this. So they're focusing on the amount of people, and there is people that suffer with this. I'm no stranger to that. People get intubated. There's 19,000 people dead in New York. That is no joke. They have been hit hard, but in California, we have not. So I think we need to take a county and statewide approach and say, okay, James, let's look at your county. Let's make a rational decision. Do your people need to be wearing masks anymore? How prevalent is the disease? Because masks also decrease the herd immunity and slow the process of disease. Masks are worn in the medical community to block us and block our outflow. For instance, if I'm doing a procedure with a patient, I put a mask on me so respiratory droplets aren't going into my sterile field. So it's not necessarily for you. I mean, it is for you, but it's to keep my respiratory droplets to myself. So I think we need to have a discussion with our state representatives and my recommendation with the doctors I'm talking to is to form a physician COVID alliance where we say, we're on the front lines. I'm not in an ivory tower, signing legislation from DC. I'm on the front lines. I'm seeing thousands of patients through my clinics. I'm managing staff. I have 250 employees. I'm right there with you guys. We haven't had to cut back too many employees, but the hospitals have had to back down, and we don't have enough of a presence in this county to justify that. So, James, I don't know what your county is like, but it sounds like, where are you from, in fact? I'll just look it up real quick.
I'm in Chicago, so I'm Cook County. I'm in the heart of it here.
Let me look up Chicago. I'm going to go so I can give you exact data.
And it would be the county of Cook if you're looking by county.
State. I just need the state.
Illinois.
Okay. Let me find your exact numbers here. North Dakota. District of Columbia. Missouri, Rhode Island.
Are those numbers that only the medical field are privy to?
If you go to Worldometer, if you have your computer up, Worldometer says that Illinois has a total deaths per million of about 184. You guys have about 52,000 cases. I don't know what your population is in Illinois. And you've had 2,300 deaths, which is similar to California. California has had 2,000. Illinois has had 2,300.
That sounds correct.
Yeah, so you're similar to California. So I say we look at this county-wide and start opening up the schools in places like this. But again, I'm not a politician. I'm an urgent care doctor. I'm an entrepreneur. I spend most of my time on entrepreneur activities now. So I'm trying to use my 15 million views to say, you know what, folks? I've been given this platform for whatever reason. I want to get us moving. I don't want to delay this anymore. When they say let's follow the science, I've been telling people, please, if you have data showing that shelter in place and social distancing works, will you please send it to me? Because my epidemiologist friends tell me there is no such data.
This is the first time in history where the people that are not sick are being actually quarantined. It's not the sick being quarantined. First time in world history.
Exactly, Tom. I agree with you, and I've always said it's not the healthy we quarantine. It's the sick. My first video went over that, and I've said to people, even in biblical times, when you had a leper, you didn't tell everybody to go in their houses. You took the leper outside the city. This is 2,000 years ago. This is the Bible, kind of telling us maybe more than what we know today about disease management. So it doesn't make sense to me. I haven't understood this process, and I've talked to many. There's hundreds of doctors that are emailing me saying, I don't understand what's happening. This doesn't make sense from a scientific perspective. Thank you. There's 12.6 million people in Illinois, by the way. So where do we go from here? I mean, that's everybody's question. And my answer is a stepwise approach. If the governor would be so kind to invite me to discuss it, I would say, let's get a stepwise approach going, open the schools up immediately. Let's see how it goes for 2 weeks and then start opening up the small businesses. But I haven't been invited yet, so.
Yeah, well, don't hold your breath.
Is that Australia or New Zealand?
New Zealand.
New Zealand, nice.
Thanks for asking.
Dr. Erickson, I have a question. So what if a patient comes in and they have these symptoms of COVID and they're short of breath, they're put on a ventilator, they think, but you do the testing. How long do your tests take to get back right now? 3, 4, 5, 7 days? I mean, and let's say they die within 72 hours, they pass. And how are we giving the cause of death, COVID, if the tests haven't come back yet?
Well, let me give you a quote here from Dr. Jensen. Dr. Jensen is a Minnesota state senator. I don't know if anybody's from Minnesota, but he's a Minnesota state senator, and he goes, it's interesting. I got this edict the other day that said, and I quote, he said, I'm being coached to add COVID-19 to the death certificate, even if patients were never tested. That doesn't make any sense. When
No.
we do an autopsy or a death certificate, I've filled many of these out, and they say, Dr. Erickson, why did they die? I say they died of acute respiratory distress syndrome, they died of hypoxia, they had a heart attack, all kinds of things. You don't die from flu, as you guys know. You die from pneumonia, you die from multi-organ failure, you die from sepsis or infection in the blood. You don't die from COVID. That may have started the process. And COVID does cause some acute respiratory distress syndrome and other lung problems. But you die from the secondary infections usually. You go into hospital, you're treated for pneumonia, and we could get into a whole therapy discussion, but I don't think you guys are interested in that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Did I answer your question, Heather?
Yeah, I think you did. Yes. I mean, how many tests what tests are you using on your patients, and how long does it take for them to get your test results right now?
We're using what's called PCR, and it checks for the virus by a nasal swab. We get our results back in 1 to 3 days, and we've done probably 6,500 tests to date. And we just started doing what's called a blood test. They call it serology. It just means a blood test where we draw your blood and we check for immunoglobulins, which is IgG.
Right.
And if you have an immunoglobulin positive, your rate is high enough in 5 to 7 days to be completely immune. You will not transmit disease when you have IgG flowing at a decent rate through your body, which is an immunoglobulin.
Well, that's good info. I don't know how much time we have left with you, Doctor, but Sarah runs a business out of 2 states, and she had a couple of interesting questions earlier. Do you want to unmute Sarah? And
I don't see Sarah. Where is she?
Sarah, I see her.
I'm right here.
Oh,
I have a couple of questions. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate this.
Oh, there she
For
is.
joining us. One question that I do have, in our field and going into so many houses, what would you recommend for us? I understand what you're saying, and I understand that we're going to have bigger repercussions later, but to protect our technicians and our customers, what would you suggest us doing? What would you recommend?
What type of cleaning are you doing?
Well, so we had all of our guys fit with respirators, and then so they wear shoe covers when they go in.
Is this house cleaning?
No, we are appliance repair
Oh,
technicians.
appliance repair. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going in to repair appliances.
Right.
You're saying, how do I protect my techs going into homes when they're repairing whatever appliance is broken?
And our customers, how do we keep from transferring stuff to each customer? Because we definitely don't want to be responsible for that.
Let me tell you this. Most people that are not elderly, not immune compromised will get this with little to no symptomatology. That's why herd immunity, isolating people, makes no sense. We want to get to that curve as quick as possible. I want to get the disease going, get people done with it, and get over with it. If we try to protect and stay, I'm giving people hugs and shaking hands. If I was in your house right now, I'd give you a hug and shake your hand.
Uh-huh.
So,
But to like protect our customers, because we have a high clientele of elderly, I would say.
So if
And
you're going, if you're going in there, if you're wearing, N95 masks have the best penetrance. So if you're going to be around the elderly and you're thinking, well, I may have had it, but I don't want to give it to my elderly customer, an N95 mask is probably the best way to protect.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
I just had to unmute myself. We got one more panelist here, and then we do have a couple of questions that came through on the chat board. But Bob Dougherty, you actually had to you had to quarantine yourself. You were exposed to the virus, and you have a number of technicians. What's your story?
As far as the quarantine itself, my daughter first contracted it. She works in a doctor's office. I wasn't around her, so I left my home. On the 14th day, I was staying with my sister. She contracted the virus and then transferred it to me. So then I spent 14 days in quarantine. And it was sort of like, I got it, I got a fever, then I felt fine. And then on the third day, 72 hours, like 70 hours into it, the fever came back, and then the coughing, then the achiness and whatever. So I quarantined for 14 days. Finally, on the last 3 days, the fever gave, and that's been pretty much it. Basically, the doctor said, just stay home, self-quarantine, don't go near anybody, and if you can't breathe, go to the hospital. Yep. And that literally scared the whatever out of me. I was pretty scared.
Yeah, most people, and you're feeling fine now?
I am still groggy, but I don't know, who knows the weather? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm paranoid from it. So no matter where you go, it's like, oh my God, I got the Rona. It's like
yeah, and the media did a good job at hyperbole and really scaring people to death. And I tell people, if you're young, healthy, and don't have multiple comorbidities, you'll likely do just fine. Now, we see the cases of the young people. But again, what I have to tell people is, unless you see the death certificate report that's signed by the treating physician, and they say, death from COVID, I say, no. They died from other things: bacterial pneumonia, sepsis or blood infection, acute respiratory distress syndrome. That's what's on the death certificate. So I say to people, when they say, oh, this 32-year-old died, I go, did you see the death certificate? A lot of people are putting on the death certificate and they're pulling that off as a COVID death. I would like to argue we need to see the full death certificate to see what they actually died from. So this is not, per my epidemiologist friend, I'm going to give you Dr. Gisecki and Witowski's opinion. This is not something we need to be terrified of. We have about 62,000 deaths in the United States, which is typical for a flu. You're going to get a flu-like illness. For most people are going to get through it. Our elderly are frail. The vast majority of people who succumb to this are elderly, frail, comorbidities, and that's who it's really going to affect. Now, are there exceptions? Yes, there are. Should you be terrified of that? No, you shouldn't. And a lot of these treatments, I've read doctors who have treated 1,400 people with hydroxychloroquine, with zinc, and with azithromycin, and they've had very good results. There's some new drugs coming out to test it, even if you are older and you succumb to it. So I want to really encourage people to not be afraid and to we have to obey our leaders, but I also want to make sure we're challenging the plan and make sure that our collateral damage doesn't crush our country.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. That there are checks and balances in just about every industry, and this is one of them. So one of the questions we've got from the audience, AJ asked, how or when or are we going to hear from more doctors talking about the data and not the theory? Why are more doctors not speaking out?
Because they're afraid. I mean, I've been attacked. My medical institutions have attacked me, and you guys have probably read it, all the nasty things that have been said. I don't think I'm a nasty guy, but I guess some people do. When you stick your head out and you speak against the powers that be, I'm not speaking out against the powers that be. What I'm saying is our administration made a decision a couple months ago. They said, we have an unknown virus coming out of China. Let's lock down. And I say, okay, that's fine. Block travel, we'll stay in our houses. But then once we figure out, we know about the coronavirus now, once we understand how fast it's progressing and the death rate, now we can change our policy and start to loosen things up and get back to work. And I see that happening too slow. I love states like South Dakota and Texas, states that are being progressive and moving forward. I like to see that. I would like to see more of that in California. So I think each of us need to write our governor.
Have you received any support from any politicians regarding this?
I just got off the phone with a 5th District Senator out of Arizona who said, right on, brother. We are pulling for you. I had a Zoom meeting with 5 senators from California, all saying, right on, brother. But they said, we don't pull the lever, the governor does. So I'm encouraging people, call your governor. Go on public forums, post, do Zoom meetings, record and post, and let them know we, the people, are ready to open.
Yeah, I know that plenty of people are getting tired of sitting around their house. Heather, What else
I
did you
have
have?
one more question for you.
Sure, go ahead, Debbie.
We have heard that you're not supposed to take ibuprofen through this. You're only supposed to take Tylenol. You know, if we can't get into the doctor and they're telling us if you feel bad, just stay home, and if you get worse, go to the hospital. Are there any other over-the-counter medicines we should stay away from?
You know, I have heard that. I don't know. There's a lot of evidence for that, as it's only been going on for a couple months. People have attacked me for not having double-blind, placebo-controlled, peer-reviewed journals, and I'm going, folks, it's been months. Like, this takes time to accumulate. It takes a long time. So I gave people my opinion on a point in time with my data, basically trying to show us where we were at. But to answer your question, I know I have heard that about Motrin. I'm not exactly sure why. I'd have to look it up. Mostly they just say Tylenol and write it out. And if you're getting worse, you know, obviously go to the hospital and be evaluated to see if you need to be taking one of the medications that works. And hydroxychloroquine, to be clear, we've been using that for more than 50 years. The rheumatologists will tell you it's very safe, it's effective, it blocks something called cytokine storm, which is why we developed this acute respiratory distress syndrome. So we have some treatments that are promising. We also use convalescent serum, which is basically taking, if I'm immune to it, you take my blood and you put it in you to help you have the antibodies and fight the disease if the blood type matches.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Erickson. Thank you to our panel. We're going to wrap it up. It's a little bit after the hour. Thanks everyone for their time. And I know this is a very personal conversation for a lot of people, and but you know, it's a tough conversation to have. And thank you for everyone to come on to share your thoughts and your knowledge about the COVID crisis.
Thank you, guys. Call me anytime.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you,
Bye.
Doctor.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.